The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for NCEA's webinar, Mindset Matters, How Self-Talk Can Propel Your School to the Next Level, brought to you in partnership with the Pacific Institute. I'm Andrea Cobb, Manager of Educational Resources with NCEA, and I'm happy to host this webinar for you today. Before we begin, please know that all your microphone connections have been muted. If you have questions during today's presentation, please send those through the question box that appears in your GoToWebinar panel. To ask a question or share a comment, use your mouse to click into the blank box area, type your question using your keyboard, and then click send. The webinar presentation will last about an hour. You can post your questions at any time throughout the presentation to be added to the queue. Immediately following the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a brief survey about your webinar experience, and I thank you in advance for providing us with this valuable feedback. For those of you who are attending the webinar live, you'll find a copy of the presentation materials and your certificate of attendance in the handout section of your GoToWebinar panel. You may download them at any time. You will receive an email tomorrow with instructions on accessing this recording. Let us begin, as we do all things, in prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Now, to get us started today, we have with us Douglas Solomon, Executive Advisor to the Pacific Institute. He is going to welcome all of you and introduce our panelists. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Andrea. All of us at the Pacific Institute, or TPI, as we're often referred to, are committed to supporting the NCEA and supporting the mission of Catholic education across the country. We're grateful to the NCEA for this opportunity, and we're grateful to each of you for joining us. Today's Catholic education leaders are looking closely at igniting fresh thinking, aligning stakeholders that help people get behind common goals, and accelerating growth. And a key driver to today's leaders to meet their growth goals is mindset, as we touched upon in our November webinar. Today, we're going to dive a little deeper and explore how self-talk can propel your school or system of schools to the next level. Laurel Meneg and Chris Scafidi of TPI will lead our discussion today. Additionally, I'm grateful to Donna Moss, Principal of Cathedral School in Raleigh, North Carolina, for joining us today. Donna is a nationally recognized thought leader. She's been featured as a speaker at NCEA Convention and has presented to principals and teachers across the country on topics such as leadership, financial aid strategy, fundraising strategy, and community building. Donna's team was recently completed their accreditation process, and the findings pointed to a strong culture and a happy place to work. But Donna is never one to rest on her laurels, and she'll be partnering with TPI to take her school community, administrators, teachers, and students to new levels of achievement. So Donna, thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Douglas, and good afternoon, everyone. I am very pleased to be part of this today, and I'm looking on the screen and seeing that you're seeing my wonderful school. You can tell by the architecture it was built in 1938, although our school was founded in 1909, so we've been around a while. I'm wondering if we could advance a slide. There you go, thanks. So I want to tell the story of how Cathedral came to meet TPI. As Douglas mentioned, my school, we just completed last week the reaccreditation visit with Advanced Ed. And so you know the expression timing is everything. We were prepping for advanced ed. We were knee-deep in the new Catholic standards and benchmarks. And I believe those standards and benchmarks are significant work, which, if implemented well, are definitely a roadmap to excellence in our schools via the 4 domains. And I started to think, as we were self-assessing where we were in each benchmark, how do you really translate the rubric levels into reality in your school? And I started to think, what does a level 4 really look like? So since we were, as I said, knee-deep in the 70 benchmark rubrics, the title of the webinar in November, Mindset Matters, Moving the Needle on the National Standards and Benchmarks, really caught my eye because we're a team at Cathedral. We look at a challenge and we don't back away, make excuses, or blame someone or something for what is happening to us. And we'll dive into the Cathedral mindset a little bit later in the webinar. But I truly believe that what TPI offers and what Catholic schools need at this moment in our history makes it an exact right time for TPI to be a key resource. Catholic schools need a mindset change, and it must start at the top with our superintendents and our principals. And so I've invited TPI into my school for 3 days in August and September, and they'll be presenting 21 keys to high performance teaching and learning because, again, timing is everything, and I feel my school is ready. So, you know, we think about it and we say, why can't we be a level 4 school across the board? We think 70 benchmarks, no problem. We've got this. It doesn't really even cross our minds that we're not going to be able to accomplish that by working together. So our hope at Cathedral is to really be boots on the ground, and we're hoping to write a roadmap of sorts for other schools. A couple of other initiatives that were very challenging that we had implemented over the last handful of years: cost-based, need-based tuition, and one-to-one laptops, and standards-based grading. And we are currently on what we're calling the journey to personalization. So all those things that we're hearing out there in education literature about how to personalize this journey for our students. So we basically thought if we used kind of techniques that we would use with curriculum goals for these benchmarks. So basically beginning with the end in mind, visioning what a level 4 benchmark looks like, and then backward map and see what are the steps that we will take to get to that. And so, again, I'm very happy to be here, and I look forward to coming back on a little bit later. We're going to have Laurel continue on, and so Laurel, take it away.
Well, Donna, thank you so much for sharing what you just shared, because what you're actually sharing is how to put the tools from Pacific Institute into action. And it sounds like you're using many of our concepts already, and by partnering with TPI, you're going to make it just that much more deliberate in the future. For those of you in the audience, if you've read Carol Dweck's book, she talks about fixed mindsets or growth mindset. What Donna is suggesting here is that we need to develop that culture of growth mindsets. And TPI does give you the actual tools on how do you develop that positive growth mindset. So how do we turn that thinking around? So let's go back and review a little bit from what we did with our first webinar. And we covered off 3 main concepts or terms here. The first one was scotoma. A scotoma is a Greek word meaning a blind spot. And the challenge with blind spots is that you don't know where they are. They're caused by the way that we talk to ourselves, and it totally affects the reticular activating system, which is the second concept here, which is the natural filter in the brain, a group of cells in the base of the brain that causes you to filter. And what happens with this is it brings in anything that is significant to you, anything that is important to you, or anything that would be a threat to what you believe to be true, and blocks out or builds a scotoma to anything that's not important. So it acts like a screen door. So this screen door lets in air, it lets in light, but it keeps out the bugs, something that we deem not important. So this is exactly what your mind is doing. And so we'll talk more about that with the next slide. And so if we can just change slides here. All right, so this screen door concept is alive and well in all of us. Let me give you a simple example. I think we used this last time. If you expect to have a bad day, what will be important news to you? Well, of course, you're going to let in more of the bad news, whether that's in the hallways with parents, even in the news broadcast, you're going to let in more bad news. But if you expect to have a good day, you're letting the good news in. And then if something bad does happen, it's in a whole different context because you're still in that positive mindset. So it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, and it affects then what we see and what we do. So the next step here is that if we go to our next slide, from the reticular activating system, once we rehearse a belief over and over and over again in our mind, it starts to affect more about what we hear and see. If I'm a principal, for instance, and I think a few of my teachers just don't have the talent, then what would I probably notice in them? Well, I would probably notice their lack of performance. I would notice mistakes that they're making. And what might I build a scotoma to? Well, of course, where they're trying hard, where their performance is good. Now, if I'm missing where their performance is good, what's going to happen to praise and recognition? It's just not going to be there. And in my mindset then, if I'm thinking that they're not up to par, they don't have the talent, then if I'm withholding praise and recognition from them, how are they going to start to feel in my presence? And what happens with their mindset and what they're looking for in us? Now, if I'm in a classroom as a teacher and I believe that, a few of my students just can't learn, well, it starts to become that self-fulfilling prophecy, and again, I start to treat them like they can't learn, very subconsciously. I'm not even aware of some of my actions, my facial expressions, the tone of my voice, but it certainly will come across to the student, which can really affect our enrollments down the road. So this screen door concept works with all of our beliefs. So do we have limiting beliefs that can hold us back, or do we have liberating beliefs that can move us forward? A fixed mindset is all about limiting beliefs. We're holding our potential back. Versus a liberating belief is going to open up the reticular activating system to help us find the information that we need. Now, I could be a principal immersed in a conversation with somebody from the alumni. If I truly believe that, there's no resources available for Catholic education anymore, I could be missing opportunities for potential resources that could be available to me through the alumni, but I'm not paying attention to it anymore because my belief it's impossible. However, if I'm actively seeking more resources, my reticular activating system is definitely going to be open to people, to information, to resources that might be available, or where is somebody else doing this? How can we capture those same ideas and bring it into our school? So it's either going to prevent opportunity or it's going to help move us forward into opportunity. So if we can go into the next slide. Okay, our third concept that we covered off in the previous seminar was how the mind works, what happens with our decision-making process. So at Pacific Institute, we break the mind into 3 pieces just to make it easy to understand. The first one is the conscious, second one is the subconscious, and the third one is the creative subconscious. Now, the conscious has 4 major functions. It picks up information, but keep in mind, as it's picking up information, it is a selective perceiver because of the reticular activating system. The second step is that it associates, have I seen anything like this before? So what happens when we have 4 witnesses to a car accident? Well, we get 4 different stories based on how people are associating the information from past conditioning, stories, books, information that they have stored on their subconscious mind. So what happens with that then is I start to evaluate, is this information good or bad, and then I make a decision. I think in our last seminar we talked about using an example of a person that's always late. Now, if I'm that person, I'm always late, and I'm getting ready for work in the morning, I just happen to glance at my watch and it's 8 minutes before I usually leave the house. What kind of creative ideas might I get? Well, I'm going to get all the creativity I need from my creative subconscious. It's going to give me drive, energy, and all the creativity to maintain my belief in my subconscious that I'm always late. Now, all of a sudden, I notice it's 8 minutes before I usually leave the house. I'm going to be flooded with ideas of what I could get done, that one more thing that I can get done, like emptying the dishwasher, or I could fold the towels in the dryer from the night before. I can check my email one more time. I'll get all the ideas I need to maintain my belief that I'm always late. Now, what happens with that is when I make those fast decisions, and I'm not even paying attention to it, it affects my performance. And if you could keep in mind just this, decisions drive behavior. Behavior drives performance. So if we want performance to improve, we need to improve our decision making. And that is based on our subconscious. So we need to work at changing our mindset or our thinking that we have buried in our subconscious so that we can improve our decision making. Now, let's go to our next step. Thoughts do not disappear. The subconscious mind does not know the difference between real or imagined. And so what we say to ourselves can have a tremendous impact on our performance level. As an example, what do you say to yourself after you make a terrible mistake? Maybe I could have a few suggestions come through on the chat line. So what do you say to yourself when you make a terrible mistake?
We have some answers coming in. How can I be so stupid? Oh, help me, God. I can't believe I did that. Oh, no. What did I do? all kinds of things.
Okay, all right. So usually when I work in a seminar format, I have a raise of hands of how many people have a tendency to beat themselves up when they make a terrible mistake. Now, that is so damaging because those thoughts do not disappear. And if I repeat that mistake in my mind over and over and over again, it's just like it's happening again. And it continues to be buried into the subconscious, and it can affect my long-term performance. So this is really interesting because we need to think about what we are thinking about. And the more that we put ourselves down or put other people down, we are lowering our image of ourselves and lowering our performance level. So this ties right in with our next slide here where we talk about the self-talk cycle. Now this self-talk, it's the ongoing internal conversation that takes place 24/7 every day of the year. In fact, as I'm talking to you today, you are having a conversation in your own mind. And if you were to take a step back and just starting to monitor your thoughts, it would be very interesting. So how do you evaluate and assess your own behavior? Your self-talk affirms the evaluation of yourself. So let's go to that next slide where it talks about how it affects our self-image and performance. So this is a self-talk cycle that we use, and it's a great tool to help us understand what's happening here. If I have some negative self-talk, it lowers my self-image and my performance follows. Now, let me give you an example of this. Let's say as a student, I believe I'm a C student. So here I am, that's what I average out. Now, if my mark goes above a C on my next test, I start to, just disassociate, not do my studies, I'm not well prepared for the next test, so that I'll come in with that lower mark than a C, so I will average out as a C student. I know I'm a C student. Now, if my mark goes above a C, then I don't pay attention. So if it doesn't matter if I am going above a C or below a C, I'm still going to regulate back at that C student level. So it really affects performance in a student. Now, so when your performance matches your self-image, it's interesting because whether we are aware of it or not, it's because it's matching. We're saying, well, that's just the way I am, that's just like me, and we have a tendency to agree with our thought patterns in here, which solidifies my self-image again, that that is my performance reality. So whether I am better or whether I am worse than what I believe myself to be, I will always come back to that averaging out to what I believe to be true. Now, sometimes what happens is that we coach people backwards into a performance level that we do not want. And then they agree, yes, that's like me. So let me give you another example. If we went back to that example of being late, so if as a principal I have a staff member that is always late, I keep telling them they are always late. In their mindset, they are agreeing with me, I'm always late, and so there's no change in behavior. All I'm doing as a leader is perpetuating the same problems over and over and over again. As an example in the classroom, if a teacher is noticing a child always picking on other students, and the teacher reaffirms for that child, you are always picking on others in this classroom, then the child says, yep. In their own mindset, they go, yes, that's just like me. I've always been this way. And so again, no change in behavior. And so we just perpetuate the problems in our school. So this is like what we call coaching backwards. We're coaching people into performance issues rather than coaching them forward. So how do we coach forward? Well, we need to give people the replacement picture. So it's not enough to say where they're going wrong and to give them feedback. We're not going to be dismissing when things are going wrong, but we need to offer people the picture of what to do right. So in the case of a child, we would say, stop it. You're too good for that. The next time you treat your fellow students with respect, we expect everyone to be treated with respect in this classroom. And you coach the child into the performance that you want them to have. Now, if I'm a leader with that person that's always late, what you need to be saying to that person is say, we expect you to be on time. Next time, we expect you to be here on time. And so you coach them forward. So this whole statement of the next time is absolutely critical for improving performance, whether it's in yourself. So when you're making a mistake, you need to tell yourself the next time I intend to, and tell yourself what you want to do right. So how we improve performance is through monitoring our self-talk. Absolutely critical. If you think of a child being bullied at school, each time that child thinks about someone bullying them, it's as though the event is happening over and over and over again. And what it causes then is a downward spiral of negative thoughts, which can be very, very damaging to the child's self-esteem. So we really need to be coaching people forward. So your self-image controls your behavior controls your performance reality. Okay, so let's go to our next. We have a poll for everyone. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very negative, 10 being very positive, how would you rate the school group talks? So think about hallways, think about teacher to teacher, think about staff rooms, think about teacher to student, think about relationships with parents. So on a scale of 1 being negative, 10 being extremely positive, where would you rate your school? So we'll wait for you to submit your answers. Okay, so I see only 4% are at the 9 to 10 level, 54% are at the 7 to 8 level, 29% 5 to 6 level, and then we've got lower 7% for the other two. Now, in Marty Seligman's work, I'll get to that in just a moment, I think. So what we want to do then is to be very responsive to any kind of negativity in the school, because people are negatively networking your school. That's going to have a huge impact. So rating, just being aware of the organizational self-talk is really vital. To have health in the organization, we need that positive self-talk. And so as we have these group thinks, it affects, if we could go to our next slide here. As we have negative self-talk, it has actual negative impacts. And so it can affect many different things in a school. And I'm sure, Donna, prior to you helping this school that you're in change their mindset, you may have been impacted with some of these. So with the negative group talk, what has been the impact on your school? How is it showing up in behavior?
Please go ahead and continue to put your answers in the chat box. We have a few coming through. Low morale for teachers and students, potentially dropping enrollment, lower parent engagement, less laughter in the hallways, low morale, people not following policies, lack of cooperation, resistance to change, lower student achievement, lack of respect for authority, not feeling good about yourself.
Wow. So these situations are very real. And even if you only have a few percentage points of people that are quite negative, it is amazing the impact that that can have on the whole organization. Now, as a leader, you have a tremendous impact on the group talk. So we'll go to our next slide. Are you looking for the good news or bad news? What's your self-talk like, and how is it affecting the organizational group talk cycle? So the more that we think negatively about a situation, which could be new rules, regulations, lack of resources, it becomes our group image and it affects our performance reality. Now, in some of these schools that we have worked in where resources have been quite limited, there is such a downward spiral of thinking of all the staff members and the faculty members that we're just not going to make it. And if they get into that mindset, instead of being into a growth mindset, it truly will become that self-fulfilling prophecy.
To be fair, I feel like I am a naturally confident and optimistic person. I'm also quite competitive. I'm half of twins, so that'll kind of give you the idea there. But I had the honor, really, of when I came to Cathedral in 1999. There were 90 years of sisters as principals ahead of me. So I had the honor of being the first lay principal. And my mindset when I came into my role was, and I was brand new as a principal too, so they really took a chance on me. But I just said, I am not letting this school go down on my watch. And why that was even part of the discussion was because we were the old school, and around us in Raleigh were growing new schools. 3 new schools came online. 2 of the older schools were adding a grade a year. And one day in August of 2000, there were 1,500 students in Catholic education who hadn't been there before. So we basically had to create our own story. And we decided we were going to tell it to everybody who would listen. We had an old building, so we decided, you could have a limiting belief or a liberating belief. And so we decided we were going to focus on our history and our tradition. As I said, there were many new schools around. But the one thing that we had that they didn't have was proximity to downtown Raleigh. So we marketed the fact that we could use downtown Raleigh as an extended campus. So that was a couple of examples of turning lemons into lemonade. I heard a quote by Robin S. Sharma, and she said, leadership is a mindset that shifts from being a victim to creating results. And I really believe that's true. We spun our own cocoon. So we kind of decided together, there was a little bit of us against them, a little bit, but it really worked to our advantage because the us in our little cocoon were the teachers and myself. And so we decided that, you know, so what if we're a small school? We need to do what larger schools do. We just do it for less students. Our building only holds one class of each grade, so we have a student body of 240 students. Folks call us the little school that could. We think we can, and then because of our positivity, we do. And we thrive on abundance, not scarcity. So we really try to live as we should, feeling gracious, gratitude and abundance. And you know, we can decide as leaders and as teachers to be productive and constructive, or defensive and hostile and hopeless. And so I just, and even in recent years, as we've heard in different articles and such, that hospice mentality for Catholic schools, you know, kind of the idea that we're going to die, we just don't know when. And I've just decided we're just not going to subscribe to that at all. Now, interestingly, please know, you know, I'm not a 9 or a 10 every day. There's certainly things that happen, and you have to stop for a minute and get your mind right. But so things aren't perfect every day, no doubt. But I think one of the gifts that I've given my teachers, and it's all part of that whole innovator's mindset that we're trying to create for our teachers and our students, I just tell them, you know, there's pretty much nothing they're going to ask me that they would want to try that I'm going to say no to it, unless it's, you know, a health or safety issue or illegal. But I think we've created an incredible bond, because I tell them, I'm not the principal who's going to dump on you if you try something great and it fails the first time. And when I give them permission to take a risk and fail, I really can't describe to you how that changes our bond and the camaraderie that we feel. You know, there's lots of things we had to change. I had mentioned earlier, cost-based tuition was a big change. Standards-based grading, the change to that 3 years ago was huge. I think they say change is hardest at the beginning, messiest in the middle, and best at the end. And I wouldn't trade where we are now for the world. But you know, when we expose ourselves as leaders, you know, to our staff, you know, that maybe we don't have all the answers. When I didn't know what to do next, I told them. I said, I don't know what to do next. I'm not sure what the next step is. And to not have to be the expert all the time, it's really freeing, and it frees up your mind to think of so many other things. I want to try to grow teacher leaders. I need folks who can step up and step in. And I think when they heard me say, I need your help, they heard that with their ears, but I think what they heard with their hearts was, I need you. And when a principal says to their teachers, I need you, the teachers, I feel like they embraced that. They became learners through all of the new initiatives that we've attempted, and they found out exactly how it feels to be a student. And that has done wonders for the relationship aspect that our teachers have with our students. So there's been a lot of help, teacher to teacher, and again, that has translated into our students being a very collegial, collaborative group helping each other along the way. One other last parting thought before I pass it to Laurel and Chris. I just, when the real changes happen in our brains, when we have the kind of deep conversations with those that we're working closely with, the conversations become innovative and energizing, and it really does lead to higher levels of partnering and trust. And then that's just like being on the wheel. That synergy just starts going, and then the mindset's even like, there isn't anything we can't do, you know, hence us trying to get to level 4 on all those benchmarks over the next handful of years. But anyway, so Laurel and Chris, I'm going to leave it to you to keep on going. There you go.
Well, Donna, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story. You can definitely hear the enthusiasm, great spirit in your voice. And so what an awesome opportunity for you to lead people into the future and have that kind of an impact. And so that organizational group talk that you monitor in your school building is absolutely crucial to academic achievement, to retention, referral opportunities, and enrollments. And over and above that, to creating the organizational climate or culture that will drive a high-performance organization. So Chris, do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I'll just close out real quickly, Laurel. You know, and having done this for, you know, I've been involved with Pacific Institute for 17 years and then teaching in Catholic school prior to that. Pacific Institute, there are probably 60-something concepts that we teach on mindset. I would say that this one particular topic on self-talk is probably the most impactful, it's one of those areas where if a person alters their self-talk, they could actually start to see immediate change. With a lot of our concepts or initiatives, when we're talking about something, we're talking long-term change. A person controlling their self-talk is something, an area where you start to see immediate change. And that's the same for, you know, when we start to get into culture, and we've been starting to get into that, you know, these last couple of slides, in particular what Donna was talking about. And you know, when we do culture, another definition of organizational culture is really the story that we're telling ourselves. You know, what is the story that we're telling ourselves? And it becomes cultural when it happens at a group level. And so I would encourage you, as all of you are thinking about your schools, about your diocese, and maybe the growth goals that you have around student enrollment, or the growth goals that you have around student performance, what is the story people are telling themselves? You know, is it, boy, we can't compete with the public school system. It's impossible to improve enrollment in this particular environment. The Catholic Church, you know, there's a decline in mass attendance. Whatever that story that we're telling ourselves, we want to ask the question, is this story helping us, or is it hindering us? Is it holding us back? And I really love, I mean, Donna's point on, you know, leadership is moving from that, you know, the victim mentality to creating results. And, you know, and that's the role that we have, whether we're a superintendent, whether we're a principal in a school, or whether we're overseeing a classroom. How do we take that that focus and that ownership over really changing the group self-talk so that the story we're telling ourselves is liberated? And we'll be getting into that a little bit more specifically in our next session on culture. But I'll just stop there, and we'll open it up to questions.
Okay, we have a few questions coming in from the audience. Someone has asked, what can we do for those who have negative self-talk, carrying it to the others?
Okay, well, this is Laurel. I'll chime in here. I really think it's important that as a leader that we monitor that. And as Donna was saying, we need to have some tough conversations sometimes. Certainly learning more about how self-talk impacts performance and how it affects morale and impacts other people is really important piece of education to remind them of. And I would imagine that in their studies to be even in the school in the first place, they would have learned many of these techniques, but over the years perhaps worn down and now forgetting them. But we all need those reminders on how important it is. Donna, do you have some specific techniques that you've used?
Well, I'll actually give you a real example. I had a teacher similar to what you described. You know, it seems like you know, every idea met with an eye roll, or you know, chit chat in the teacher's lounge or whatever. And you can see that damage that it's going to do, right? You can sense that. And so the biggest, again, the hardest thing, hit it, get to it fast, because, you know, they mentioned earlier how much one negative person can impact the organization. And the interesting thing is, sometimes when you just have that real heart-to-heart conversation with someone and you tell them what you're seeing and feeling about their mindset, they'll reveal something that you probably never even thought of. And in this particular instance, it was that they are kind of afraid of change. And so, here I am, all gung-ho with a new idea. Okay, here's a new thing we're going to try. And it really was as simple as that. They just are a person who didn't embrace change as easily or readily as I did. So it wasn't that they were trying to undermine me. It was really just they were expressing who they are as a person. And once you know that, I mean, that's easy to fix. So, sometimes it just, you'll be amazed if you take the moment to have that chat, what you'll uncover.
Okay, a follow-up question to that. You said if you know someone's afraid of change, that's easy to fix. We immediately had a question pop up that says, how do you fix that? How do you move forward with people who are afraid of change?
Is that back to me? A lot of times it's basically, let's drill down. What are you afraid of? What do you think is going to happen? Are you going to fail? Am I going to fire you? What are the things that could happen? And so a lot of it, again, is just saying, look, no one's perfect at things when they're trying them the first time. And so it's really just kind of doing what you do for your students as teachers. We bolster them up. We give them confidence. We tell them there isn't anything they can't do. And the most important thing, I think, is I will be with you every step of the way, and I will help you. So that's kind of been my solution, when folks have been nervous about change.
Sure, maybe I can add to that too, and I think it's important that you reiterate with them times when they have made changes, so where they have been successful, and so that they can recall a good experience around making a change, whether it's personal or professional, and then you pull it into this experience that they're coming into now and just say, you were able to do it in this instance, so what we're going to do is, and then you start talking about the changes that we need to make, but in a way that they can feel safe into the change. I think they need to be able to see themselves in the replacement picture. And so we have used that technique quite often in our work with TPI, where we reiterate what's gone right in the past, where we were able to implement successfully, and then we drop in the new change that we're about to make, just as a suggestion.
And I would just add to that, it's painting that real clear picture of what people are, the direction that we're heading. And sometimes we haven't painted that picture clear enough for people to see that it's possible. Sometimes it's letting them know that others have been similar others have been successful, and so that it's possible. Sometimes it's really normalizing the resistance to change, because it's most of us are. We naturally sometimes pull back from it, but I think it's normalizing that, and then really developing that crystal clear picture of what that change is, why we're moving into that change, and then demonstrating to them that it's possible. Right?
Well, thank you. This question I think is probably geared towards Donna. You mentioned earlier an example of some phrases to reframe negativity in regards to being late. Can you give some other examples of phrases to incorporate or reframe negative self-talk for students?
For students, sure. In fact, my teachers try to do this. I've seen bulletin board displays where they give the child an alternative sentence to say. So, for example, if it's if the child says, I'm never going to be good at math. Okay. So then the sentence could be, I can do anything if I ask for help from my teacher, or so again, like exactly what Laurel and Chris were saying, just basically training them to switch to the positive, to be conscious of our thoughts and switch to the positive. And that's what I do on bad days myself. When I am, and like I said, I've got those days too, And I just consciously saying no, I'm not going to go down that road. Nothing good can come of it. And that's kind of how I kind of jolt myself back to a 9 or a 10.
And I would just add that it takes some intentional education in the classroom, you know, about self-talk and how it affects us, and for us as teachers or educators to really translate that and to even share with little kids, well, don't say I can't do that, or don't say this is impossible or this is too difficult, because we explain to them what happens is your brain shuts down and you're not going to be able to do as well as you might be able to. And so when we kind of set those ground rules and we're reinforcing that on a regular basis, it's then when you're in the situation where that negative self-talk pops up, you're reminding them, this is our ground rule, this is how we talk about ourselves, and it makes has a phenomenal impact. Also, as a parent, also makes it easier to get the kids to clean their room when you're using constructive self-talk. Just I'll throw that little tidbit in there.
This is Laurel. I think also, as Chris was talking about this replacement picture, one of the things that we talk about in our classes is that you've got to give feedback. So if somebody is talking that way, you want to jolt them a little bit and just say, stop it. You're better than that. We are working with you to make sure that you learn this, and you're really creating a climate where the student helps themselves as much as you're helping them. So I think, and so what would they do differently the next time? And so you've really got to call the behavior, but then quickly give the replacement picture of what to do the next time. And ideally, if the child is a little bit older, you're asking them the question, what will you do differently the next time? And they are thinking to themselves rather than you telling them what to do. They are thinking for themselves and taking that accountability to help change their behavior.
Laurel, I just wanted to add one more quick thing about that. Just the, some of the times just the way we structure our school impacts all of that. For example, how do we grade students? What is our policy on that? Those are things that are in our control as leaders. And I know one of the things that I think has just really dramatically changed to this type of mindset for our kids is a switch to standards-based grading. And they, as you said, feedback. I had a basketball coach who came to me and said, I don't know what you're doing at that school, but my kids on the basketball court continually ask me for feedback about how they can do something better. And so that drives a relationship, between learner and student. And so it just, again, it's feedback. I can't express that enough how important it is.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just add to that with the reticular activating system. When I give up accountability, that's when I shut down my awareness and I shut off the information coming towards me. So if I think it's supposed to be the teacher's job to teach me and it's not my job to learn, then we are in trouble. So shifting that accountability with the student is really important so that it opens up their reticular activating system to hear the significant information that will help them succeed as a student. And that's something that the teachers really need to pay attention to. So rather than even reinforcing in a classroom, this test is going to be really hard. We are working well together for everyone to be prepared. So let's do our personal best. And so just changing the talk of the teacher towards the student can help the child have better recall and relax during testing exams so that they can perform better. It's as simple as that, just monitoring that self-talk.
Great, and Laurel and maybe Chris will want to chime in on this too, because I'm kind of merging a few questions here. There's a theme coming through with leadership issues. You mentioned kind of that idea of taking ownership of some things. We have a couple people asking questions related to, I feel like I'm the only one looking at the positive, or not everyone is following the rules, which is contributing to self-talk. How do you bring a staff together when you have those people who seem to be those resistors and you feel like you're up against a wall? Can you comment on that a little?
I'll just make a quick comment and turn it over to Laurel, get her thoughts. What I find is that most people want to be constructive and want to be positive. But they're unconsciously sabotaging. They're not even aware that they're being negative. And so it's one of the things that helps us is, creating those opportunities to get off the treadmill and to do some self-reflection. Whether you're, that's a big part of our transformation process is really self-reflection. So people get a chance to both learn about how the mind works, whether you're reviewing a great book like Carol Dweck's or something else, so you're learning about how the mind works, but then it has to go a step beyond the cognitive to personally reflecting on it. Okay, so what's my thinking like? What's my scotomas? And then to normalize it, because I think there's this expectation that we have to have all our ducks in a row and that we have to, be 100% a constructive thinker all the time. And the reality is we just have scotomas, and if we could normalize that it's okay for me to be at a different place than someone else, then it allows that person to self-discover how they might be blocking themselves, how they might be blocking the students, how they might be blocking the growth of the school. So that's what I would add. What are your thoughts, Laurel?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Chris, and I think that self-discovery process is so important. So if a leader is just telling somebody to be more positive, the creative subconscious, if it does not agree with the picture that you're giving them, it just gets into creative avoidance, procrastination, and they slow down and they do a job good enough only to stop you from pushing them into a performance level. So if as leaders you can remember that when you push people, they push back. And so if you're pushing somebody with, trying to be coming down a little bit hard on them that you can't be negative, well, what they're registering is being negative, and being negative. And so when I ask the question, what are you tolerating? That's where you've got to have those sidebar critical conversations and having them self-discover how are they impacting through their behavior, how are they impacting the results in the school. And so it's really what are you going to deem as being acceptable? And so sometimes just those one or two naysayers are enough to destroy the climate in a whole school building, and it really needs to be addressed. And so having the courage to tell them that that's not acceptable and then give them the appropriate behavior that you're expecting from them is so important. I can't stress that enough, but it takes efficacy from what Dr. Albert Bandura was talking about, that it's my own ability to cause, bring about, or make things happen. So the higher the efficacy of the leader, the more the building climate will change. So.
Okay, we're going to go with one final question. There are more rolling in, and we will be happy to forward those questions to our presenters later if you have specific things. But one final question related to parents. How do you differentiate responding to what may be legitimate complaints versus balancing, that negative self-talk and the habit of just complaining to complain?
Chris, do you want to address that, having been in the classroom yourself?
Well, I'd be curious to hear how how Donna responds. And I mean, again, a big part of that goes back to the self-efficacy and self-reflection of the educator's perspective.
Yeah,
sometimes
I know. I was, when I think about the parent thing, it might not. I know you don't know me, you guys, but it might not surprise you. Like, I'm okay with having that conversation with a parent too. Like, kind of say, like, to really pose that, what's really going on here? Because it can't be about, the teacher couldn't find my kid's sweatshirt. It can't be about that. So what's really going on here? And again, sometimes similar experiences to what I've had with teachers, and you surround it with just what we do in Catholic education. You surround them with love and caring and goodness and concern, and you wrap your arms around them, and so you let them know you care. Just like with the teachers, you say you're sorry when you make a mistake. You ask them how to resolve something. You bring them in with you. You know, I always say we're not playing solitaire. You know, we're not holding all the cards ourselves. We are playing with, everybody's got cards. So that's just kind of a little thought I have on that.
Great, thanks. And before we conclude, I want to thank all of you for spending your time with us today. But Douglas, did you have any closing words for our audience before we sign off?
Oh, very briefly, Andrea, certainly a big thank you. The TPI team stands ready to partner with schools. We partner with central office leadership teams, and we partner with principals and teachers diocese-wide. Just keep in mind that our program offerings range from one-day in-service sessions to multi-day retreats to long-running relationships, and that our services do qualify for title funding, and frequently we've seen that funding can be provided from foundations or other supporters that are looking to support leadership development initiatives. So I believe Chris Caffidi's contact information is on the screen now. Chris is a subject matter expert, a true, just mission-driven member of the Catholic education community, and we're here to help, and we thank you for being with us.
Great, and thank you all again, and thanks to our audience for their great and active participation. I know there were a few of you whose questions did not get through, but please send those to Chris, and I'll be happy to send them to our panelists as well. Invite you all to visit our website at ncea.org/webinars to see listings for upcoming webinars, and we do have another one offered by the Pacific Institute coming up in May. They will as well be presenting at our NCEA Convention and Expo in St. Louis, so please check them out there as well. As a reminder, I will be sending you this webinar recording as well as a copy of the presentation materials and a certificate of attendance tomorrow. Thank you all again, and may you enjoy a blessed evening.